Good afternoon, everybody. This is the April 19th, 2021 Heritage Preservation Commission meeting. And I'd like to call the meeting to order. And if anybody had a chance to read through all the minutes, if there's any corrections to be made. If not, I'd like a motion to approve them.
So moved.
Have a second?
I'll second it.
And we also, that was the March 15th meeting. Now we had a special meeting on 4/5. If you read the minutes on that one, I need the approval on that one also.
I'll approve it.
Go ahead.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We're going to go to design review. Elwood.
In your packet is a design review for George's Ballroom. It is now owned by State of Minnesota, with Brown County being the holder of it. 14 South State is their address. It's coming up for, they want to move with demolition of the site. And attached are some discussion points that we'll hear from people that are here. We'll go through that. And also attached is a letter from the New Ulm Police Chief citing some safety concerns that he's aware of with the ballroom itself. So with that, I'll have Ms. Brotniak come up and give you a little bit of history and status of George's.
All right. Anybody coming up to the top, just state your name and address, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jean Prochnick. I'm the Auditor Treasurer of Brown County. We have the task of administering this property for the last several years. I sure thank you for letting us present this information to you. The State Historic Preservation Society recommended that we come to our local group to review and comment on our decision to move forward with the demolition. So that's why we're here. We're thinking that maybe we can take this discussion today, because it is being taped, and take that along to the state, and that way they hear the whole thing of what we presented and your thoughts on that. So I would start by saying that George's, was built in 1947. It had 3 complementary units. It had a ballroom, a bowling alley, and a bar. It touted being the world's longest bar in Minnesota at that point. The ballroom, this facility enjoyed several decades of success. It closed in the early 1960s. The ballroom, though, stayed popular for a lot longer than that and remained open on sporadic scheduling through 1991. And so by the mid-1990s, though, the entire complex sat idle. George Nyworth passed away in 1995, and at that point, the building began falling into disrepair because of its vacancy. Despite boarded-up entrances, George's iconic sign and the Art Deco architecture loomed large over the downtown New Ulm area, and we know that. With their iconic imagery come a flood of memories for generations of people who lived their glory in that place. As the building remains vacant and continues to deteriorate, George's has become a controversial symbol within the city. Some residents desire that the building be restored to its former glory, so that it may once again become a focal point of culture and entertainment within this town. This desire is driven by nostalgia and the grandeur of a bygone era. Others cite the economic portions of it, the costs of the environmental costs, the economic costs, and the aesthetic burden the empty complex is causing for New Ulm. And that's the reason why we're coming here requesting approval for demolition. Opposing views over the future of George's Bar and Ballroom speak to the complex's impactful history on many lives. The building and its sign are aesthetic and social signifiers that have become defining features of the built environment in New Ulm, deeply entwined with the town's character and history. In this way, losing George's feels like losing a crucial part of New Ulm's identity. On the other hand, the demolition and replacement would play into New Ulm's ability to constantly reinvent itself. Regardless of what happens to George's, the ballroom's legacy will live on as a contributor to the history and fabric of New Ulm's resilient spirit. All of the sentiments surrounding the facility made some difficult decisions when the state of Minnesota acquired the property in 2002 through tax forfeiture. The property was sold at a tax forfeited auction on August 1st of 2003 for $1,000. We did that in hopes of giving someone an opportunity to take the building, stick some money into it, and hopefully rehabilitate it, not having to pay so much on the initial part. Well, that plan didn't work. The building continued to sustain damage to the interior from lack of heat, water infiltration, and numerous other issues. The property forfeited a second time in 2010, or 2019, I apologize. At that time, we knew there was a statute within the state that allowed us to take care of buildings on tax forfeited parcels that are causing, we can contract for demolition if it reduces the value of property in the neighborhood because of age, dilapidated condition, or excessive size. The demo can also be done to improve the chances of selling the parcel. So on September 24th, the county board authorized the Auditor Treasurer's Office to begin the process of demolition. And that motion passed at a county board meeting unanimously. So in November of that same year, the city of New Ulm filed with us to withhold that property from public sale because there was potential that someone might have been interested in that property, and by them withholding it from the sale, they would have an opportunity to sell it directly to an investor. It's a technicality within the law that allows that to happen. So, we kind of hung our hats on that, hoping that something would happen there as well. That action to withhold the property was effective through May 26th of 2020. But that effort failed. The developers that did step forward did investigations and found out that the improvement or rehabilitation of that parcel was much greater than even was predicted back in 2002. So it came back on the tax rolls. At the same time, while the city was working on looking at a developer, the county was hearing outcries from the city, our townspeople, about losing George's and the history that went with it. And we certainly we recognize that. I mean, it's not that we are about ruining a district, a historic district, but we knew what we were up against. And so the county board asked us to form a committee of a cross-section of developers, the historic, Kathleen from the Brown County Historical Society. We had city input. We had a person that dealt in demolition. We had people that shared some of the historic and the nostalgic parts of it as well. After the presentations, we found that we all were in agreement that there really wasn't much opportunity to salvage the building. I've been, you can see I have a picture. We had a drone fly over the outside of the facility, and I've got more drone footage than just that, but you can see that the roof is in total disrepair. We were going to take a drone inside of the building and be able to show you. A lot of people get hung up on the murals that they had on the walls. I'm sure many of you remember seeing those. Those murals don't exist anymore. They've peeled off the walls. They're folded down. I have not been in there in probably 10 years, but they were folding then, so I can only imagine what they are now. The person who does our drone, he said to go inside there when there's wires hanging and that kind of thing. He said it would be pretty dangerous. He could ruin his drone. And it's dark. He didn't know if you'd get real good footage anyway. So I wish that I wish I could see it again, to be honest, but it's very dangerous. We've talked about only going in there with hazmat suits as well. So we talked about a lot of options at that meeting, and we've presented to you a letter that we got from the chief of police regarding safety. That was one of the concerns that we dealt with. We have gone down there, and juveniles have been found on that property. There is graffiti on some of the, on the top of by the roof. With the holes in the roof, somebody could get hurt, you know. People don't think always about what they're doing. We know that there's been people back in the courtyard and dinging around in there as well. And we just are concerned about that safety feature. So, as just to continue with some more of the information that was shared with us out at our committee meeting, we want to share with you. And so I'd like to turn this over to Terry Sweeney, who was part of the original George's reuse study that was done back in 2002. That was when it was a really hot topic within the city. So we'll let him continue.
Thank you, Jean.
You're welcome.
Hello, gang. I'm Terry Sweeney from New Ulm, and I'm going to talk about our reuse study. I'm from here. I grew up here. I had a ton of fun at George's, as did my parents. It was the place to be. As I look around, many of you were here for that. For 30, 35 years, it was the place to be downtown. There's no question of that. I also would point out for two terms, I served on the HPC, so I am of a preservation mind. I moved back home to New Ulm in 1995. And it bugged me to no end immediately how bad this thing had gone. I'd been away for 13 years. And this wonderful place is going to heck in a handbasket. Well, nothing I could do about it. George's daughter, Lois Hughes, owned it, and she would come to town once a year in summer. And you actually see her go up to her apartment up here. And she'd be around for like a month at a time. I visited with her one time. How come you're letting Dad's building go to heck? Well, no, I didn't. But anyway, so as Jeannie talked about, so in 2002, it defaulted on taxes and came to the county's ownership. And so I thought, this is the time. So I formed the Save George's Ballroom Committee. We held talks around town, like information, ideas, show of support or show of non-support, but it was pretty successful. I saw there was a sentiment to save this thing. So what do? So I was actually on the HPC at the time and knew a little bit about it. So I went to SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, and they gave me some directions. And one of them being to hire a professional historical architect. And so we raised $11,000, grants, individual donations, and Barb Harrelson threw a whole lot of money at us. Thank you, Barb. And we hired Thomas Zahn and Associates. And Tom came down in 2003. I went with him through the building several times, and he's got a good photo documentation. He was taking notes on everything, and then came up with his reuse study. And it's pretty thorough. I mean, you can see how big it is. It's not a Sears catalog, but it's pretty big. And at the time, it was going to cost $1,000 to tear down. Or, excuse me, we wish, huh? $1 million to tear down. He said, it's custom-made art stone brick that's so well interlocked, you're not just going to hit this with a big old swinging ball and it come down. You're going to work at it a long time. So $1 million in 2003, 18 years ago. And he also had on page 16 an estimate that it's just shy, just like a little shy of $3 million to rehab. And at our committee meeting just a couple weeks ago that Jeannie referenced, Eric Bodie and Jim Sheeman, who are both real estate developers, said that $3 million to rehab is probably 4 or 5 now. And then what? So you bring this thing back to what it was, and there's no way in the world we're going to dances 3, 4, 5, 7 times a week. Those days are gone. As much as I had fun, and many of us did, that it's a different social period. And so you rehab it, and now what? Eric, just quick numbers off the top of his head, he said you'd need to cash flow that at $30,000 a month. What are you going to put in there that's going to bring in that kind of money? And so, that putting the hard numbers to something was an eye-opener for us. So Scott Winchell, a county commissioner, made a pretty cool insight. It stuck with me anyway. He said, we've had a professional reuse study for 18 years. And I worked closely with Randy Danielson when he bought this, just because we were in the middle of this process at the time. And I don't know that Randy ever references. He may have looked through it, but he didn't use it as a guideline. And so aside from that, nobody, like Winchell said, for 18 years, we've had the how-to book, and nobody's referenced the how-to book. Are we going to wait 18 more years and see, and nobody's used it, and then it's even worse. So as much as I feel emotionally attached to it, already 18 years ago, I had given up. I said, I don't know what can be done with it. I worked at the Chamber of Commerce for many years, as some of you know, and one guy, to my memory, came in. He was going to do an antique mall in there. And he went and looked at it. I don't believe he went inside. He just looked around the outside and he said, nope, this is way worse than I thought it was. And so with essentially no interest, the time for what it was is gone. No interest in doing something else with it. I have to, as much as I like this, have to agree that it's no good. I did come up, and this is me speaking not for the committee. I did bring this up at the committee, but I said, let's memorialize this somehow. Let's not just tear it down and have an empty lot. The rough plan is to demolish it, and that'll take quite a bit of doing with all the mold and such that's in there. And then make it Eric referred to it as a shovel-ready lot for whatever redevelopment may happen. I said, let's save this sign, put it on a big honking pole, secure it into the corner or wherever is deemed reasonable, but in the corner, and then have the typical black historic markers talking about George's. And maybe we go so far as to call that George's Plaza or some such thing, to at least acknowledge and give a physical reminder of what was here and the role that it played. But that's me speaking as me, not for the committee. So, Jeannie, did you expect anything else from me? No. All right, well, any questions or otherwise? Good, thank you, folks.
Thank you, Terry.
Elwood Zabel, building official. Speaking a little bit on the structure and environmental issues of George's. There was a structural engineer in a few years back with one of the developers looking at stuff. The roof is in need of repair. The roof is the original roof from 1947. So there's that going on. But once we get into the supporting structure of the roof, there isn't some need of repair on that in many different places, and also with some of the structure back then. Kind of give you an idea, the utilities were turned off in 2009. So it's been sitting that long with nothing inside. And there's many leaks in the roof. There's water running out the doors after it rains and stuff. So just the sheer aspect of that, the inside is deteriorating quicker and quicker. And there may be some more structural problems than when the gentleman was walking through there. Some of the environmental issues, Terry talked about mold. We've got asbestos in many different places, including the roof product itself, probably some on the walls, on the flooring itself, and also lead that we'd have to deal with. So there's those issues along with that. And some of the quotes, those were a few years back on the abatement of those issues were between $350,000 and $450,000 just to abate those. And demolition is kind of in that same area, $360,000 to $440,000 is one of the local contractors gave me here last year. So there's some big issues there. And going along with what Terry said on cash flowing at, what Eric said, that $30,000, that's including the 40% tax credits he figured in there also. That's 20% from the state and 20% from the federal. It would still have to clear that just to cash flow monthly on that. So.
Thank you, Elwood.
Okay, Jean, again, I just want to, you have the letter from the police chief. We didn't ask him to come to this meeting, but you have that. And most of our conversations have revolved around Eric's attempts at revitalizing that building and sticking some money into it and not having any luck with that. I didn't hear back from him, and so he was on the agenda, and I apologize, he's not here. But Kathleen Backer is here, and we'll talk about historic preservation and some of the thought processes that this committee came up with and hope to share with you.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Backer. I live at 115 South Minnesota Street, apartment 106. As Terry, I grew up in New Ulm, and a memory of my memories are, will live on forever as some of the most enjoyable and fun times of my life, of course, being a teenager, and so on. And then as an adult, going there for wedding dances. That place was so busy that if you wanted a wedding dance, and I just looked at one of the old promotional cards for George's, live music on weekends, wedding dances on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Mondays. It was that popular, and you wanted to have your wedding dance there. You had your dance on a weeknight. And when we look at George's Ballroom, in just a short life of that building compared to Herman and other structures in this town, it has evoked so many good memories. But my job as the executive director of the Historical Society is to look at the property from the historic perspective and say, can we save this building? And of course, that's our first priority. Our mission is to collect, preserve, disseminate the history and heritage of Brown County. Any building that's of historic nature comes under our responsibility. And so, of course, we supported the efforts to keep the building going, to reuse the building, repurpose it, encourage people to look at incentives that are there from the local, the state, and the federal government. Those were all pointed out to the investors. City of New Ulm knows where those dollars are. County of Brown knows where those dollars are. And certainly, savvy investors like Bodie know where those dollars are. And so people have invested, as we had Randy Danielson, and the last-ditch effort was looking at Eric Bodie. He certainly has demonstrated his interest in repurposing structures in this community. And so I looked at him as the last-ditch effort, very hopeful that maybe something would be done and could be done. But in my opinion, they've backed away from it, saying this is not fiscally reasonable or responsible. So as a historical society, then, we move beyond preserving that structure, and we shift to what we consider now our responsibility to document its existence. And that goes into trying to identify the original documents, where are the drawings for that building, the stories that go along with it, photographs, and so on, so that we complete an archives of that structure and what it meant to all of the constituents of this community and to Brown County and beyond. And so it's really difficult to shift to that, because like Terry, I want it to live on. But, and all of you in the room, I'm sure. But sitting in on that meeting on March 31st and seeing visually the condition of the building, you want to save the murals, they're gone. They're laying on or floating away or turned into mold on the floors. There were beautiful medallions on the ceilings, they're gone. And so I don't think anybody on our staff, and I don't know, and Cara is a board member with the Brown County Historical Society, I don't know that the board of directors would, in good sense and in good faith, insist that any of us go into that building. I don't even know, Elwood, if we're allowed to go into that building. It is so toxic or so undermined, and so documenting it would take place in a different way with contacting the community. So part of our responsibility then is to disseminate the story of the ballroom. And so if that's the end result, then as Terry said, can we memorialize that structure? Can we take the marquee, affix it to some kind of structure, and create a memorial to that wonderful building with a story, and so that it can be disseminated for future generations, and they can feel through that interpretation, have that experience that we have had. So we've come to the conclusion, at least I, as the executive director, would recommend to my board of directors to support a recommendation to raise the building and to prepare it for future development. Now, there are contingencies related to that through the State Preservation Office. Because this property is within a designated historic district, there would be related issues that we would be sensitive to, that we would encourage whomever is raising the building and preparing it for future would take into consideration as they move forward. So it's with a heavy heart, seriously, that recommendation will go forward to my board to support demolition of the building. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
And that's what we've got for you.
That's it.
Yep. So now it's your guys' discussion.
Well,
It's a sad day.
sad day is right. But, I mean, after I read that report from 2003, if it was that bad then already, I said, I can't imagine what it is like now.
And that cost was just bringing it back to usable state. That if somebody now would go in there and do something, change the occupancy, would need to be brought up to current code also.
Right.
So it could generate even more costs on it.
Well, I like the idea of saving the marquee for sure. I mean, and memorializing that. Maybe should be taken down now before it gets destroyed even more. So, I don't know. I'm just voicing my opinion right now. But, anybody else?
Yeah, my comment would be that I'd like to thank the presenters for that. I'm glad you people went in the direction I was hoping you were gonna go, that somebody wasn't gonna say, let's try it again. Because I myself have been in the building, dealt with it, the past owners. I read that reuse study page to page when it came out. It's terrible, but it's time to come down before it comes down itself.
Right.
Someone gets hurt.
Like she said, somebody gets hurt if we're having trouble with people trespassing.
I've dealt with old buildings like this when I'm John Schladweiler, for those that don't know me, that we bought the old New Ulm Oil building on 5th North and Broadway. And the roof was at about the same shape as this one. But fortunately, the inside was much better. The walls it's an art stone building. The walls are very, very solid, and we were able to rehab it. Had it gone any farther than that before we bought it, it probably we'd be talking about that today instead of this one. And it's sad to see it go. It's like having a dog get old and you're having to put it down, kind of thing. It's very, very sad to do, but, I see that that's probably the best thing for it.
Is there any way that inside the place, I know everybody's saying like you can't go in the building, but whether it's the booths or the stage floor, or there's just no way of getting any kind of artifacts out of there to either, to your point of being part of a memorial of some sort, or even giving pieces to the Historical Society. I mean, I know that everybody's saying you can't go in there, so maybe that's not even an option, but I always go to the point of if there's anything in there that could be saved as far as an artifact of, of some sort from inside. I don't know, part of the bar, or, taking the bar out and...
Well, we can definitely look at that when they start doing the demo and stuff, if that's the route you
I mean,
go.
you could do some sort of thing of, buy a George's Ballroom booth or people, just looking at it in a sense of there might be some people out there that might want a piece of it, or,
I don't know how much of that is even salvageable at this
Okay.
point.
I just didn't know, I mean, as far as any pieces of anything in there
Yeah,
that's,
the floor I've seen that is buckled 2
Right.
to 3 feet, just from the water damage. The booths are, when I peeked in the door, were covered with mold. It's that, the environmental guy that came talking about the demolition and stuff, when he started talking about the mold issue, generally Clorox and water and you clean it up, but he's talking over a sustained amount of time, it starts growing inside the products. So like inside the concrete, inside the wood, where you can't take care of it, get rid of it. So,
I mean, a comment, I'm gonna say 10 years ago, that's the last time you and I might have been in there. I didn't think there was anything salvageable anymore.
okay, just curious, because I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
it's
it'd be
something,
worth a try, but
yeah.
if they're even together now, the booths.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, we could sure look at it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's something where, some sort of an artifact that you could mark, not that you want to sell it, but it's just something to think about that.
I have to think, is there a cornerstone?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could do that.
That's that I
I've looked at it how many times, I don't know if there is or not.
don't recall one.
Several years ago, the museum redid the roof, the 100-year-old slate roof, and we had artists paint on the slate tiles, and we sold them at our auction. I'm wondering if maybe some of the exterior bricks could be saved and sold. I don't know their condition.
That'd be a question for the people coming in for the demo. How big those are on the main facade and stuff, being art stone, I
No idea.
have no idea if it's 2 by 2 or if they're, what size they are, but that's something also that can be looked at if that's the route you go.
When we redid the New Ulm Oil building, we had to replace the parapet around the overhang and everything. And we took all that brick down, or not all of it, but most of it. And that mortar in that stuff is just stronger than heck, and you'd have a heck of a time getting individual blocks apart from each other. It's really, I mean, that mortar in there is as good as it was in 1922 when it was built, and I assume that it's the same here.
Considering the damage of the building, you'd be surprised, I'm surprised that it hasn't started collapsing in some areas. It just seems to be pretty solid for the structure of the walls.
The
but-
structure itself and the walls are fairly decent from what the structural engineer said. It's the roof we're waiting for it to collapse in.
Right.
I mean, that's the big worry.
Zahn said at the time, he said that thing is so well built, it should be New Ulm's tornado shelter. Now, not that it's in perfect shape, but it's super interlocked, custom interlocked stuff. It's gonna be really hard to tear down and therefore hard to save.
Yeah,
How bad are the doors? Can you save the doors, like, have it like you're opening up to something if you do the marquee of the or whatever the bar is, like in the corner? Just a thought.
Yeah, we'd have to look at them. They got boarded up now, so.
Yeah.
But I recall a couple of them are in pretty rough shape.
Or they,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, but they're again, something to look at.
I mean, I have to believe that the county, I mean, like Mr. Winchell had said, the commissioner, I mean, they're gonna make every attempt they can. And if it's not salvageable, it's not salvageable.
We, Brown County Historical Society, your information did put in our Sam Hanson, that if there was, if we could be given go in, identify, and take what we could serve and things on, look at all. But at that time, we weren't allowed to go in, and it was kind of wait and see what we're waiting.
well, I remember when George's daughter came back, she had auctions or rummage sales down there. I know I've got some of the things that used to be nailed onto the poles around town with all the lists of the dances for the next 2-3 months. So there's got to be some artifacts out there that some people might have that be willing to donate to the Historical Society, because that's probably where it belongs. I'm going to look for mine, for sure. Yes, Jean?
some antique furniture there at one, not much. But
Yeah.
I haven't been in for many, many years either. I'm not going in there. It's,
Yeah.
it's got awful. And so, I wouldn't risk sending somebody else in. We had a request from someone from the college that's going to do some things around New Ulm. It's called What's Inside. And they wanted to do a What's Inside ballroom because people can't go in there.
Yeah.
So we couldn't even let him in, the vice of the county. So, our hands are kind of tied as a governmental agency selling a tax forfeited property. Can only do so much. So we had to resort to statute for what was the best direction for the building.
So Elwood, you're looking for us to make a motion to have the building put it up for demolition, but to save as much of that outside marquee stuff as we can.
Follow SHPO's guidelines on.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
So is there any more discussion?
I can be the bad guy. I'll make the motion to proceed with the demolition in accordance with the Brown County.
Second it.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is passed. Sad to say. Thank you all for your information. It was very, very interesting.
Claim, make sure that goes in the back page of the paper tomorrow. No.
Elwood, do you have a city report? I don't have anything either, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your coming tonight.